Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for one of our July faculty development sessions, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, One College's Strategic Plan by Drs. Ronn Johnson and Renuga Vivekanandan. I'm Dr. Jessica Seaman, Assistant for Faculty Development in Creighton School of Medicine. I have just a few housekeeping items before we introduce our speakers. This session is being recorded and you will have access to the recording and slide presentation for future reference. We invite you to submit any questions in the chat to everyone or send just to me, and we'll get to as many as we can by the end of the session. We do ask that you remain muted with video off unless asking a live question, just to assist with the recording. Also, this session is eligible for continuing education credit, and you will receive the website and activity code at the end of the session. There is a short survey associated with the continuing education, and we thank you in advance for providing any feedback to us as we continue to build robust programming for our faculty and staff here at Creighton. Now, I am very excited to introduce my good friends and our presenters. Dr. Johnson is Senior Associate Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and Professor of Psychiatry in Creighton School of Medicine. He is also Lead Clinical Psychologist at Nebraska Western VA Healthcare System's Mental Health Clinic. Dr. Johnson has directed mental health services to a wide range of underrepresented in medicine and underserved groups, and he crafted the 4R approach to promote diversity, inclusion, and belonging in several academic medical settings. Dr. V is an associate professor of internal medicine and chief of the infectious disease division of the department in Creighton's internal medicine. She has been director of the antimicrobial stewardship program and hospital epidemiology for over 8 years at CHI Health Creighton in Omaha. We're grateful to both Dr. Johnson and Dr. V for their willingness to share their time and knowledge with us today. So Dr. Johnson, if you're ready to begin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Seaman. Dr. V, could you turn to the slide on the agenda? So I'm going to kind of walk you through the agenda for this morning. We only have less than an hour to talk about some of these things, so if we don't get to talk about all of this, we'll certainly welcome the opportunity to do that offline at some point. But the agenda starts with me sharing a personal diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging statement. And then I sent, or at least Dr. Seaman should have sent out, a copy of some diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging terms that we're going to use in this presentation if you're not familiar with them. We're going to do a brief DEIB survey, talk about the goals for the School of Medicine in this area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and then give an overview or snapshot picture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within the School of Medicine. And then Dr. V will talk about the advancing of inclusion and spend some time looking at microaggressions specifically in a more granular level. So I want to start out the session by sharing with you my personal diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging statement. And I believe that we should all be crafting our own one and posting it actually. So I'll share mine here because I think it's very important for us in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. My personal code inspires me to work to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging by making it central to how I function in an academic medical setting. I believe that I have the capacity to heal and honor every person that I meet. And when it comes to achieving diversity, equity, inclusion, it wisely requires us to give serious consideration to the costs and benefits of not proactively promoting it. So I warmly welcome the opportunities for cross-cultural introspection that ultimately lead to an inclusive academic medical experience that helps to reduce healthcare disparities. And I have a strong interest in advancing a sense of belonging, particularly in those in our academic medical family that have been historically marginalized. And consistent with an Ignatian roots, I believe that all of us have a leadership role to play when it comes to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion within the School of Medicine or the university as a whole. In the end, I just want to play some role in helping to make DEIB easier for anyone that comes after me. Can we advance the next slide, Dr. V? I think the greatest DEIB challenge at Creighton is to transform the academic culture, and where historically marginalized members say that they do not experience a sense of belonging while they're here at Creighton. And this can never be done at a distance. I think it requires us to try to build a culture of life, to extend the hand of support and invite historically marginalized group members to experience a sense of belonging. There are all kinds of examples that I could point to, and one most clearly comes to mind as an example where we had a situation where I was asked by my dean to intervene, where someone had sent out a solicitation letter with a picture of an incoming class of students, and the picture had all white students in the incoming class, and they sent the letter to a Black alum asking for a contribution. And of course, the student, the alum, wrote an angry letter back stating that she would never contribute to Creighton to reinforce the culture reflected in the picture. And there's a lot more details to this, but that incident is emblematic of why the climate survey that we recently took was so negative when it comes to not being culturally attuned to the hard reality of historically marginalized groups on this campus. But it does raise a question, and that is, who's responsible for flipping the critical mass script here? When we do get the courage to make a U-turn, who's going to do that when it comes to working to have a critical mass? In some ways, we're captured in this culturally encapsulated vortex. There are, Dr. V, if you could turn to the next slide, there are some terms that I asked Dr. Seaman to send out to you. There's 5 of them. There are probably more than that, but just for this presentation, I think these 5 will give you some idea about the things we need to be looking at with respect to understanding the key issues related to DEIB. We can go to the next slide. I'd like to start with a brief survey, and I'm going to ask you to pull out your cell phones because you're going to use them to respond to the survey. And in your text,
Dr. Johnson, I think this is what Cassie was going to put into the survey for us. So she will put that in the chat momentarily, but if we'll skip through the poll everywhere questions, and then we can, you can just keep moving.
Come back to that later. Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. I can be flexible. That's not my forte, but I know I can do it. Okay, so the question is, if we go back to the next slide past the survey, Dr. V. Well, I believe that we can accomplish a sense of belonging here at Creighton. Obviously, we don't have a critical mass yet when it comes to diversity, and there are these pop-up issues, and the pop-up issues for me are things that I'm going along doing the things related to enhancing diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and then some incident occurs where something has been really cast into the light as a high-profile incident, and we have to address it in some way. But I think we can be more inclusive and a place where a sense of belonging is reported more consistently by historically marginalized groups in our medical family. The bottom line on this is, if we can't accomplish inclusion and a sense of belonging, then we really need to close up shop. If we could flip to the next slide, Dr. V. Okay, so this slide here captures the catalyst for the cross-cultural climate change for historically marginalized members. You notice at the core of this, we have an institutional mission and motto, and around it are all the things that are affected by that mission. For us in the medical school, we have the LCME 3.3 and 7.6, and those are our accreditation standards related to diversity. LCME 3.3 basically deals with pathway or pipeline programs, and 7.6 basically deals with cross-cultural competency issues. And we had findings, and we passed those findings, and now we no longer are identified as having issues with diversity, but it's nonetheless something that we should be mindful of. The other thing here, and this more specifically for the university as a whole, is the climate survey that I read the 500-page plus survey, and it revealed, and I teased out many of the issues associated with diversity, equity, inclusion, and some pretty jarring statements in there that we certainly need to be spending time trying to address those. So if we skip to the next slide, the snapshot of the CSU's diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, really there is a nexus or a connection between diversity accreditation standards, which basically drive this process, the underlying practice pillars, which I think everyone in working in this area should have some kind of pillars related to that, healthcare disparities, workforce development, and then the development of a strategic plan, as well as actions that are needed that are all linked to the academic mission. We skip to the next slide. I want to walk you through some of the the CUSUM DEI strategic plans. We have 4 DEI goals, and each of those DEI goals has measurable tactics that we're using. So if we go to the first slide on that, which is DEI goal number 1, basically, our goal here is to substantially increase the school's contribution to diversity and clinicians, scientists by increasing the percentage of traditionally underrepresented students in the school's education and training programs. That's a huge goal. Second goal on the next slide is to substantially increase the diversity of faculty in the school. The third goal is to expand support for successful promotion and tenure of female faculty and faculty from underrepresented groups, and then provide opportunities for advancement into senior administrative positions. And then finally, goal 4 is to build cross-culturally responsive culture within the School of Medicine. Embedded underneath each one of those schools, and we're not going to go into them here, are tactics that we're using, measurable tactics that we're using that are designed to sort of allow us to reach those goals and monitor our progress over time. If we could skip to the next slide, it gives us a overview of everything that I'm talking about here in terms of the School of Medicine's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging approach. We start with LCME, or the Liaison Committee for Medical Education's accreditation standards for diversity, specifically 3.3 and 7.6. Then I took it upon myself to create a framework that would be friendly in terms of leading us in a direction that we need to work to achieve these things. And you have to have some kind of framework. And our framework is what I call the 4R approach, which means that everything we do within the School of Medicine in this area has a strong empirical basis to it, which means that the research drives why we do what we do. And then core characteristics associated with that are things like respect, things like building on relationships, and things related to being culturally responsive, which are critical to the success we want to achieve in this area. From that, the diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan and goals and tactics were developed from that. And out of that comes our various initiatives. And I'm not going to go into the detail of all of them, but there's 4 primary ones that we're looking at with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The first of which is to develop an inclusive academic medical climate. Then use culturally responsive microinterventions, and Dr. V in her presentation will talk about the role that microaggressions plays with this. Community engagement, and then we have 16 robust pathway programs that we use this last academic year and plan to use in this upcoming year. So this is it in a nutshell in terms of what we try to accomplish. And I asked the question, or at least make the statement, what you do and don't do can kill diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. There's an old African proverb that relates to what we're trying to do. Diversity, equity, inclusion is like trying to eat an elephant. You must take it one bite at a time. If you have, each of you, I think, has one vantage point when it comes to evaluating the status of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging on this campus. And I think you have to be an unvarnished truth teller. And the question often comes up is, what do you see? Or more bluntly, what don't you see? So in the chat box, I'd like you to take a few minutes and tell me what you see or don't see with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we're going to try to capture that and maybe even share it. Whether you support or actively work against diversity, equity, inclusion or not, you have to know that the earth is shaking in these areas. Why is the earth shaking in these areas? Because it's critical, it's timely. So in the time that we have here today in this grand round, it's difficult to review everything that we've done with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the School of Medicine. We still have a long way to go. There are things that help, I think, are credible cross-cultural leadership, which I think are the core characteristics for having an effective DEIB program. I will also say too, that there is no universal program or one size fits all for each school. I want to thank you for your attendance and interest, and I will turn the presentation over to Dr. V now, unless we have the survey available.
I think the survey is on its way, not here yet.
Okay.
Give me about 2 minutes and it'll
Okay,
be.
no worries. We can do it at the end. So Dr.
Okay.
V, why don't you just go ahead and go on?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So part of our Advancing Inclusion, we created an Advancing Inclusion series started last year. And this has been part of many of us all working together. It's a team effort. And then one of the biggest things that I wanted to focus on, we are working on a lot with diversity, but we also wanted to focus on what is inclusion. So just want to kind of quickly go through what is inclusion. Inclusion is a core element for successfully achieving diversity. Inclusion is achieved by nurturing the climate and culture of an institution. So when you have diversity and when you have inclusion, and that's when we create excellence. And we want to be excellent at what we do. So that is our journey. And, culture change usually takes about 3 to 5 years. So we are at the start of a culture change, but advancing inclusion and, hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be much more advanced than where we are today. So just a little bit of demographic. We definitely have shifting demographics. So as of 2050, 50% of the US population will be non-European origin. Over 10 million Americans will identify themselves as LGBTQ+. Middle class has significantly shrunk from 57% to 45% in 2018. So healthcare workers like us need to be aware of the diversity in our community and how can we give really good care for our patients. And we need to make sure we take into ethnicity, religion, gender, age, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, language, education. So a lot of things come into play. So I think when we all focus on DEIB work, at the end, the most important thing is we are giving good patient care to our patients. So in order to achieve that, we have to work on a DEIB effort. Just some data in medicine, full professorship for female faculty is about 4%. And in underrepresented minority, in Black, 3% medical faculty are Black, 4% medical faculty are Hispanic or Latino, and 2% of full professors are Hispanic or Latino or Black. So there's a lot of work to be done in medicine across US. And also graduating medical students, they usually every year they get a survey and AAMC does a survey. And in 2017, just a quick data, 7% of our graduating medical students experienced racially or ethnically offensive remarks by faculty, staff, or other learners. So that's concerning. We're making strides in increasing DEIB underrepresented medical students in medicine. There's more females. Slowly, we're changing the demographic, but we really have to create an environment of inclusion to be able to retain our learners. So why is this all important? Increase access to high quality of healthcare service, broaden the medical research agenda, advance cultural competency, support institutional excellence, and enhance education along the continuum. And this is a statement from our AAMC, a governing board for all the medical schools. So in 2011, I was part of a project. I did an executive leadership course, and this was my capstone project to continue to advance inclusion, working with many faculty and staff at Creighton School of Medicine. Just to give a quick background, there's about close to 200 medical schools and DO schools, about 6,000 hospitals in US, but we still don't have a critical mass of diverse healthcare staff or learners. So we really have to increase inclusion in order to be able to retain diversity in our institution. At School of Medicine, we categorize for medical students, the diversity category is first generation, and we are about 10%, and we need to continue to work on increasing those percentile. And for diversity category for female, for faculty and senior administrative staff, we made that as female. And we are around 35%. Nationally, it's about 43%. So we have room to work in this area as well. Just wanted to share some quick data, and we have made significant progress, and we have lots of opportunity to continue to do so. So if you look at academic year 20 to academic year 2022, first generation students first year has gone from 7 to 12%. All students have gone from 10 to 12%. Female employed faculty full-time has gone from 24 to 35%, and female senior staff from 25 to 28%. So we are making improvements, and I think our efforts are showing, but still we have a lot more work to do. And one of the big things that I wanted to focus was, all of us wanted to focus was microaggression. In order to create an inclusive environment in our community, we have to address microaggression, or you can call subtle acts of exclusion. So introducing this concept to participants, and how do you have the right interpersonal skills to be able to identify and address at that time, and introduce proper ways to be able to be an upstander in the situations. So microaggression, why does this matter? When you experience microaggression, higher likelihood of developing depression and anxiety. So when our learners, staff, faculty experience microaggression, they have higher likelihood of developing anxiety and depression. That's very concerning. And especially on learners, it creates a cognitive load. So when learners experience microaggression, they have to stop what they're doing, learning, and then they have to focus on what just happened to me. What does this mean? How do I address it? And when they experience this over and over and over again, it diminishes their academic performance. So it's really important that we are able to address microaggression in a holistic way. And Dr. Johnson and all of us worked on how do we bring this more awareness to this area. And we use the triangle model from Dr. Ackerman Berger, where it's about restorative justice model, where we are able to address microaggression, giving tools to the recipient, giving tools to bystanders or upstanders, and giving tools to the source when they make mistakes, how to apologize, how to make things better. So we have worked on the microaggression series for the last year. And some of the things that we have done is how to approach microaggression in a humanistic way, which encompasses Creighton values. School of Medicine grand rounds to introduce this topic and case series. And also we have done workshops for academic leaders, assistant dean, associate dean, chairs, at clinical partner, and at our School of Medicine, faculty and staff learner grand rounds. Recently, we did a microaggression workshop for CHI Health, all new faculty that have been in the first 3 years positions. And we are planning to do more workshops in Omaha and also in Phoenix this fall. So introducing this concept, giving individuals the tools to be able to create an inclusive environment and how to address microaggression. With that, wanted to kind of also highlight that, part of our goal is to develop faculty development, structural changes, and education. So for structural changes, for education, we developed last year School of Medicine grand rounds. And the topics that included was what is inclusion, because there's a lot of confusion about what is inclusion. There's a lot of confusion, diversity and inclusion is the same. So we include the topics like what is inclusion, how to teach inclusively, mentorship, allyship, sponsorship, how to create an inclusive academic environment for underrepresented minority in medicine. We recently had Erica Sutton from Morehouse School of Medicine who came and gave us a very good talk on how to create an inclusive environment for URM students and faculty. So these were educational components. Then we also started partnered with our School of Business at Creighton University. And we are with Dr. Dunley's leadership, we are offering female faculty and staff to be able to attend executive leadership training at Hydra College of Business. We have expanded Women in Medicine and Science to be included at this time with CHI Health Women in Medicine and Science to create a bigger network for females in our community. We also started a book club last year to learn more about structural racism, how to be anti-racist. So we read, it's really important when we work on these efforts, not only do we teach our learners and faculty, but leaders have to understand the need, and then they can disseminate these information and why this is so important. So with Dr. Dunley's leadership, we started reading a Dean's Cabinet, Caste, How to Be Anti-Racist, Wilmington Lie, The Political Determinants of Health. We read 4 different books. Upcoming year, we're planning to do another 4 to 6 books, and starting in July with Adam Grant's How to Think Differently. So a lot of work on learning about structural racism. We also implemented last year, created a School of Medicine financial committee where we have faculty stakeholders. So we have more transparency when it comes to finances, and we're able to advise our dean. And it's very timely because I feel like we're ahead of other schools. Today, Tom Savola shared an article from AAMC that how financial equity is very important in DEIB efforts. So we already, have faculty stakeholders and creating transparency when it comes to this. We're engaging our clinical partners and understanding their needs and how we could all work together. Dr. Poonam Sharma has started a coaching program for female faculty and staff to help them with their leadership skills. And also planning to continue sponsoring female faculty to ELAM program from both campuses, which that I just finished, and it was very, very valuable to advance our female faculty in their leadership skills. And next steps, we're continuing to work on understanding what are opportunities at School of Medicine and what are the structural changes, education opportunity, faculty development opportunity that we need to do, as well as understanding our clinical partners' needs, because our faculty, learners, we all work in the clinical environment as well, so understanding their needs and continue to work in this area. Can give you some example. Dr. Johnson and I just did a workshop for CHI Health new physicians on DEIB efforts and microaggression. We're currently participating in a CHI Health inclusion gap analysis. It's a 12-month program. And then after the gap analysis is finished, we're able to come up with what are the needs and how we could collaborate. Currently planning the upcoming grand rounds for 2022-2023. In August, we will discuss inclusive language. In November, Dr. Rick Waters from Phoenix, CMO at Dignity Health, he will be talking about Black men in medicine. So we are planning our upcoming grand rounds for next year, as well as there's other programming for Women in Medicine conference in September and dinner series with many DEIB topics that are coming up as well. So just wanted to highlight some of the efforts that we're doing in faculty development, leadership development, structural changes in our School of Medicine. And here is the recent, in June, we had Dr. Erica Sutton again. She came and gave a talk on creating an inclusive academic environment, which was really good. And also it's important to partner with Morehouse School of University as they're part of Common Spirit Health, and we're able to hopefully attract more underrepresented minority students into our residency programs and medical school. And with that, I will stop. And Dr. Johnson, the survey link is in the chat box.
All right, so if we can access that link in the chat box, then we can walk through the items on the checklist. Okay. So in order to do that, Cassie, do they need to be able to get into polls, or is this separate from polls?
No, I just set it up as a survey, so anybody should be able to click
Do
on it.
without even, okay. So the first question is, what college or school are you from? So if you would check one of the most boxes that most represents where you are from in Creighton.
I am sharing the survey link. Can you see that, Dr. Johnson?
I booted out of that and moved right to the.
We can see it, Dr. V.
Okay. So the
Perfect.
next question is your academic position in Creighton.
Yeah. I will just scroll through but I think each individual can just answer
At their own rate. Okay.
at
that's
their
fine.
own pace, and
Good.
then we will be able to accumulate the data.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
Is that all we need to do, Cassie? Everybody can answer the questions on their own pace?
Yep, they can answer at their own pace. And then if you want the results shared, it seems like there's a little bit of lag from when people are responding to when it's actually recording, but I could share the results if you want me to.
That would be great.
We might need to let it sit for a couple of minutes.
Oh, no worries. We can let them do that while we entertain questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so right now we'd like to, we've been barking at you for the last 40 minutes or so. And so now if it's an opportunity for you to raise questions about anything we've talked about here today.
I can read you a question from Dr. Father Clifton has a question. I'm convinced that every student at CUSOM is either more prepared or less prepared, not just for the practice of medicine, but for life, to the extent that there is a greater, lesser diversity among their peers, their residents, their attending, and all our faculty and staff. I think that's his comment. And Dr. Tierney, I see that School of Medicine really working very hard at expanding diversity at our student body. I see support of and great leadership of DIB, Dr. Johnson, Dr. V. The two areas I feel most of us learn more about is the understanding of cultural humility and perspective taking.
Is that supposed to be a question or just a statement?
It appears to be two areas I feel most of us can learn more. I think she's asking for more programming in cultural humility.
Yeah. And perspective taking. I think that would be good. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that was a suggestion.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen.
Dr. Nandapati, we have tried to recruit culturally diverse people into department. However, sometimes it has been difficult. What other steps shall we take to improve better?
It's a good question. I think that one of the things that we did in the School of Medicine that's working better for us in terms of changing the culture is that in advance of a search committee effort to move towards selecting candidates, whatever, there has to be a diversity recruitment plan that's built into the regular process of going after applicants for positions. And that plan has to identify sources, journals, other places where you can go out and recruit individuals to get them to apply for the various positions. And the one thing we found to be important with that is you have to track that to see what kind of success you gain while you pursue those strategies for recruiting diverse applicants for various positions.
If I may add as well, I think it's important to advertise in the right places. but also the actual advertisement itself has to have inclusive language. So really looking at how are we writing the job description, and the actual interview process has to be very inclusive, thought out when we recruit faculty or staff members. How is their interview day? So I picture it as a continuum, and then, you know, making sure when they're here interviewing, how are they experiencing the interview process itself, and then just continue to work on those areas. And also unconscious bias training for the actual interviewers as well. So I think when we start addressing all those, it'll help as well.
Yeah, you have to be very careful about when you bring those diverse candidates in terms of educating the committee about things to say and things not to say in terms of questions, because it's a recruitment process at that point, and you don't want to say anything that's going to essentially turn the candidate off from considering Creighton.
I have another question. Do you have any information how students react to microaggression from faculties and patients? There's data that students who experience microaggressions do poorer in academic performance, and reaction wise, there's of course power difference when they when it comes to a student experiencing microaggression from somebody of higher level, patients or faculty member or administrators. So that's why it's really important to train upstanders and bystanders when they notice these type of microaggression, how to call that out and help the students, because sometimes students are not able to respond because of the power differences. So that is been our journey to help others to realize when there is a microaggression scenario and how we can step into those scenarios and comfortably help the students. Next question is, I wonder how to foster a sense of belonging when there's not currently a critical mass of diverse representation with health science professional programs. Do you have thoughts about this?
Well, one, I would say that you don't have to wait until you actually get a critical mass, because you'll be waiting for quite a while. But I would say that you need to start with where you are. So for the individuals that you have here currently, there needs to be an effort to sort of reach out to them and create this culture where they feel invited, they feel included, they feel as part of the regular system. But waiting for a critical mass is not the solution. You have to work with what you have here and work toward getting a critical mass.
And I think also at each school showing this is important, DEIB work is important, you know, asking for input from everybody is important. I think small steps will go a long way. So and also having dialogue with faculty, staff, and students, which is what we have started doing, and we could see a difference. Even though we don't have a critical mass, creating that inclusive culture has been really important.
It's significant. A few weeks ago, I participated in an orientation session with 250 students, including nursing, medicine, pharmacy, dental, and basically 85% of those individuals in the survey revealed that they had witnessed some type of microaggressions. Then 50% recognized that they had been the recipient of a bias. And then 99% of them indicated a desire to address issues of bias. So it is a significant thing to be thinking about at all levels of the institution.
Another question is, in collecting data about Creighton School of Medicine faculty, did you include faculty in both physician assistant program, which are also in the School of Medicine?
I don't know. I think we included everyone because
Would be included. That data would be included in the School of Medicine.
Yeah, the PA program is part of the School of Medicine.
Correct.
We could talk to Stephanie Van de Meulen to get more of that data for you all as well. Next question is how it would be helpful to have some written guidelines with contact info for those who could provide advice for search committees on developing an inclusive recruitment. That's a great idea. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, we started a couple of years ago at the dean's direction to make sure that before any search committee gets started, that there's a meeting on two levels, one with me as the Senior Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, and two with Father Clifton. And the whole idea behind that meeting is to try to create the culture that we want to have in launching the search committee so they can understand what they are charged to do on those levels.
I have another question. To what extent does the statewide cultural environment, which can be viewed as not necessarily welcoming at all, influence or affected by our ability to achieve the goals of DEIB? And what is, if anything, Creighton's responsibility to address these issues at state level? So, this is tapping into what do we do at a state level? And I think this is where advocacy comes into play, and working with representatives to help advance some of these areas. But Dr. Johnson, any thoughts on this area, how we could influence a state at the state level?
Well, I think your statement about advocacy is important, but I also think that we shouldn't get too focused on state issues when we need to focus on what's happening on this campus. And once we move in the direction of having a critical mass and having an environment where our historically marginalized groups feel included, then I think we have better leverage in making those conversations stick when we go outside of the university, trying to make those same concerns expressed or known to state-related officials. And obviously, when you get into those kinds of things, you're getting into a lot of political issues that's out of my skill set, but I think it's certainly something that can create a problem if we're not sensitive to all those things.
I think this is where Dr. Tierney might always say research is a great idea. So as a great university, showing health disparity data would be very helpful to kind of help as well. Next question is, there's always communication among students and staff and faculty, which require more refinement in terms of how things are said. And we require more training to minimize microaggression, finally to eliminate it. Sometimes the aggressor does not even know that they might be a culprit exactly. And I think that's a really good point, and that's why it's really important we all learn about microaggression and then how we can become upstanders and allies and bystanders when these events happen, to even tell the source that they might even realize, but they are just created a microaggression. It's a slow cultural change. So again, just bringing this awareness, and it's going to take another 3 to 5 years where we want to be. Dr. Johnson, any comments?
Well, one of the things that we're working on, obviously very slowly, is we're trying to create a climate or culture that says, here's the framework for talking about microaggressions, for approaching microaggressions, so that when it comes up, there's already this sort of pre-existing mechanism that allows you to bring that up as a conversational piece. And when it's brought up as a conversational piece, it's met with some level of receptivity on the part of the individuals. Why? Because we've got this pre-existing framework for having a conversation about microaggressions. And that's a bigger challenge, but I think that's the direction that we need to go. In other words, a culture of care where that becomes central to how we move the needle forward. And it takes time to do that, but I think it's certainly possible.
We have another question on concerning the initiative Culturally Responsive Microintervention. Have you considered including concept of language of proactive engagement intervention? It may be useful to include ideas of proactive approaches, set the mindset of not only being responsive, but taking more active participatory approach. And that is our goal, to be able to start having all of us be active participatory and help in these situations, but also learning languages. Inclusive language is very important. And that's one of the things that we're going to work on introducing next month. So we're having a grand rounds on inclusive language when it comes to patient care area and also amongst each other, to introduce the concept and then work on more case series and scenarios. We realize that we have to continue to work on actual case series and active learning environment for all of us to start understanding the need. Next question is, maybe we should do a workshop on finding good in each other, which can help minimize microaggression. Is this in your future planning, improving diversity?
I think there probably are a lot of jumping off points that you could sort of tackle with respect to there's no one size fits all in terms of these issues. I think for me, I like to start with people who are already sort of aligned with some of these things and build on them. And then you gain strength by numbers. And over time, you gain the momentum you need to motivate people to consider the significance of some of these things when they occur.
Next question is, it looks like there has been a great work on DEIBSU main campus. I'm curious, are those efforts will be translated over to Phoenix campus as well?
I put some comments about the Phoenix campus, just a little bit lower, Renuga, but yes, there is a lot going on in Phoenix as well as Omaha.
Thank you. And also I wanted to highlight Dr. Jaya Raj is a new assistant dean for DEIB in Phoenix. So there's a lot of initiatives being done in Phoenix as well. How are you working to support faculty learners with chronic physical and mental health diversity?
Well, the sensitivity to those issues, I think, is important. I don't know. I would suspect that making connections to the EAP program would be one place where that could occur. We certainly could spend some time doing an educational program around mental health issues and staff and faculty to talk about that as a more broad topic. We could also think about having a town hall related to this, where we could talk more specifically about the issues surrounding this.
I think that's a great idea, and we will take that forward and work on some of that suggestions as well. Next question is, in a private institution, medical school admissions faculty were required to take training in implicit bias. Are there plans for Creighton to do the same?
We have offered training on implicit bias for quite some time now. I'll have to confess and say I'm not the biggest fan of the training sometimes, because I don't believe that training by itself is going to correct the problem specifically. I do think it's important to make people aware of what those biases are. And the assumption is that if you make someone aware of what those biases are, that might motivate them to change some of these biases that they hold, either implicitly or explicitly. So, but you need to have more than just that training. There has to be some kind of follow-up that helps to internalize that and also motivates the person to consider the impact that their implicit bias or explicit biases has on others.
And also Dr. Cavallari has commented that for the School of Medicine interviewers for the School of Medicine admission, they receive implicit bias training. This is all great. At their plans to develop departmental champions on DEIB.
Within the School of Medicine? Yes.
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 Can you elaborate a little bit more, Dr. Johnson, about?
Well, we're this upcoming academic year, we're working with filtering down the thing with the diversity statements at the dean's executive level, and then it will come down to the level of the department chairs. And the assumption is that we can ultimately implement that for all faculty as well. And then from there, we'll add on other dimensions connected with how to be responsive to microaggressions when they occur, how to introduce micro interventions that are designed to minimize the impact of microaggressions when they occur. What role would you play in terms of managing a microaggression, either as the person who's the target of the microaggression, the person who's the observer, and the perpetrator under those circumstances? So that basically is, I mean, it's very, it's an elaborate approach, but it's one that I think we can actually accomplish within a reasonable time.
Yeah, and our goal has been issues. And as we get to year, in 3 to 5 years, we would have had a really good platform where we had different areas issues addressed. So this year, there's more to come, starting with the diversity statement. Any other questions? There were a lot of great questions in the chat. Is there any questions? If you would like, you could unmute yourself and ask as well.
We've got just a few minutes left, so I wanted to make sure, and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Vivekanandan for talking about our colleges, the School of Medicine's strategic plan and the different things that they are heading up within our school. So I thought maybe these last few minutes, Dr. Johnson, that Cassie might be able to, Dr. Eno might be able to share with us the results of the survey so that we could just take a look at that in these last couple of minutes. Would that be all right?
That'd be great.
All right, Renuga, if you could stop sharing your screen and then we'll go ahead and have Cassie put hers up. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your willingness to share your knowledge with us.
This isn't the typical format that I would use, but this was the fastest. So I've kind of hidden the college and academic position. I wasn't sure if you wanted that, but this is, so starting with question 3, University Climate Survey revealed a declining sense of belonging and cross-cultural trust. So we've got 24 people saying true, 3 saying false, and 23 saying not sure.
Okay.
Climate survey told us something that we should have known for years, that we do not have a critical mass when it comes to diversity at all levels. So we've got 38 saying true, 1 saying false, and 11 not sure. To what extent do you believe facilitating a sense of belonging is central to our recruitment and retention efforts for historically marginalized groups at all levels of the university? And you can kind of see the spread starting up here with strongly disagree down to strongly agree being the largest with 40 people. And then the final questions, I've witnessed biases or microaggressions here. We have 37 saying yes and 13 saying no.
Very good. That gives us something to work with. So I'm not sure what we should do here. Dan, we've got about another minute or so. Do you have any more questions or comments or anything else?
It appears no other questions at this time.
Okay, Dr. Seaman, thank you for helping to handle all the logistics associated with this. And we want to thank all of you for attending and look forward to eventual more events like this in the future.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email us.
And thank you, Cassie.
No problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Eno, for putting that together for us so that we have that information. And you will be getting a follow-up email by next week. So thank you, everyone, for participating.